Have you ever wondered why millions of people all over the world work 8, 10, or 12 hours a day, constantly upgrade their skills, hold 2 university degrees, but still struggle with a chronic lack of money their entire lives? Why can a person earning $3,000 a month have more debt, stress, and credit obligations than someone making only $1,000? And, most importantly, why does the education system teach us about everything from cell biology to advanced mathematics, but completely ignore the topic of personal finance? In 1997, entrepreneur and investor Robert Kiyosaki released a book that literally exploded the global book market. It was called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. This book has sold over 40 million copies, been translated into dozens of languages, and permanently changed the mindset of millions of people on every continent. Decades later, it remains a bestseller. But what is its secret? Why does this modest book have the impact of a bomb in the mind of everyone who reads it? Today, we are going to conduct the most detailed, deep, and honest review of this book. We won't just summarize the content, we will break down the entire philosophy, practical mechanisms, economic models, as well as the dark side and criticism of the book that fans of Kiyosaki often stay silent about. Get ready, this is going to be a foundational deep dive. Part 1. 2 Dads, 2 Philosophies of Life. At the heart of the book is an autobiographical story of Robert Kiyosaki's upbringing, who, in his own words, had 2 fathers. This dualism forms the entire plot and philosophy of the book. The first father is Poor Dad. This is Robert's biological father, a man of brilliant intellect, a PhD, and the head of the Hawaii State Department of Education. All his life, he believed in the classic social model of success. That model goes like this: study hard at school, get good grades, get into a prestigious university, find a stable job with a good benefits package, and steadily move up the career ladder until retirement. However, despite his high position and solid salary, Robert's biological father experienced financial difficulties all his life, constantly struggled with bills, and died leaving behind not wealth, but a mountain of unpaid debt. The second father is Rich Dad. This is the father of Robert's best friend, Mike. This man didn't even finish the 8th grade. However, he became one of the richest men in the Hawaiian Islands. He had no academic degrees or diplomas, but he thoroughly understood how money, business, laws, taxes, and investments worked. Robert shares that starting at the age of 9, he began learning financial literacy from Rich Dad. This allowed him, from early childhood, to compare 2 completely opposite views on life, work, and financial success. Let's look at the mental abyss between these 2 approaches. Poor Dad often said, "The love of money is the root of all evil." Rich Dad claimed, "The unhealthy lack of money is the real root of all evil." Poor Dad threw up his hands and said, "I can't afford it." At that moment, his brain stopped working and stopped looking for options. Rich Dad forbade saying those words and instead asked, "How can I afford it?" That question forced his brain to fire up, seek opportunities, and create new solutions. Poor Dad taught, "Study hard so you can find a great company to work for your whole life." Rich Dad taught, "Study hard so you can buy a great company and hire people to work for you." Poor Dad sincerely believed, "My home is my primary investment and my main asset." Rich Dad insisted, "My home is a liability. If your home is your largest investment, you are in big trouble." Poor Dad believed that the government or the company should take care of his future. He waited for pay raises, pensions, health insurance, and benefits. Rich Dad believed in complete financial self-reliance. He considered relying on the government to be a path to poverty. It is precisely this difference in mindset that forms the ultimate financial outcome. Poor Dad was poor, not because he earned too little, but because his mental attitudes and financial habits led to poverty. Rich Dad was rich not because of luck, but because he thought like a capital owner. Part 2. The Rat Race. Why rising income doesn't make you richer. One of the most famous and vivid concepts introduced by Kiyosaki is the rat race. What is it? Most people in modern society live according to a closed, repeating, and destructive scenario. Step 1. A person graduates from school and university, then finds their first job. Step 2. They receive their first paycheck. They have disposable income they didn't have before. Step 3. The person starts upgrading their lifestyle. They rent a better apartment, buy a nicer phone, update their wardrobe, and start frequenting restaurants and entertainment venues. Step 4. They meet a life partner and start a family. Now they need more space. They take out a mortgage for an apartment and a loan for a new car. Step 5. Monthly expenses skyrocket. Now their job becomes vital because without a paycheck, they can't pay the mortgage, the car loan, and basic needs. Fear of losing the job sets in. Step 6. The person starts working even harder. They take overtime, upgrade qualifications, burn out, but get a long-awaited promotion or switch to a higher-paying job. Step 7. Income grows. But along with income, their expenses rise proportionally and often faster. They buy a higher-class car, move to a more expensive neighborhood, and start going to prestigious resorts. And what is the result? The person earns 3, 5, or 10 times more than at the start of their career. But at the end of the month, the money left over is exactly the same zero, or even negative if you count credit card debt. Why does this happen? According to Kiyosaki, most people are driven by two basic emotions: fear and greed, or desire. Fear of being without money, fear of not paying bills, fear of looking like a loser forces a person to get up every morning and go to work. Then, when the paycheck arrives, the second emotion kicks in: greed, or the desire for comfort. The person wants to reward themselves for hard work and instantly spends the money on new purchases and pleasures. After that, the fear returns again because bills must be paid once more, and the cycle closes. A person becomes a slave to the paycheck. They run in circles like a rat in a wheel, exhausting themselves, aging, but staying in the very same place. Kiyosaki's main point is that the problem is not the size of your income, but your financial discipline and mindset. If you don't know how to manage $100, you won't be able to manage $1 million either. Giving more money to people trapped in the rat race only increases their debts and spending scale. Part 3. Kiyosaki's Golden Rule: Assets versus Liabilities. If you open a classic academic accounting textbook or ask a certified economist what an asset and a liability are, they will give you a complex definition involving balance sheets, equipment wear, and depreciation. Robert Kiyosaki did things differently. He threw out complex terminology and formulated the simplest, most brilliant definition of these terms, one that even a 9-year-old child can easily understand. An asset is anything that puts money into your pocket, whether you are working at the moment or not. A liability is anything that takes money out of your pocket. That's it. The entire financial rule comes down to one simple truth: rich people buy assets. The poor and the middle class buy liabilities, thinking they are assets. Let's break down concrete examples for total clarity. Assets include: first, real estate that is rented out and generates a positive net cash flow. This means rental income covers all maintenance expenses, taxes, and the mortgage, with the remainder going straight into your pocket. Second, dividend-paying stocks. Third, bonds, certificates of deposit, and securities that provide interest income. Fourth, a business that doesn't require your constant personal involvement and operates through a hired team and systems. Fifth, intellectual property, royalties from a written book, a registered patent, music, video content, or a created online course. Liabilities include: first, your personal car, gas, repairs, insurance, parking, washing, and the annual drop in market value continuously drain money from your wallet. Second, credit cards, consumer loans, and installment plans. Third, any gadgets, appliances, or branded clothing you pay for over time. And fourth, the most provocative one, your personal apartment or home where you live. Why is your home not an asset? This topic sparks the most debate for Kiyosaki, as society considers buying a home the ultimate achievement and a family's main investment. But let's look at this from a cash flow perspective. If you bought an apartment with a mortgage or even with savings and live in it, every month you pay mortgage interest to the bank. Every year you pay property taxes. You constantly pay utility bills, maintenance, and repairs. Money is continuously flowing out of your pocket. Even if your home increases in value on paper over time, you don't get real cash in your pocket until you sell it. And if you sell your only home, you still need somewhere to live, and you will likely buy another home that has gone up in price just as much. Rich Dad never said, "Don't buy a nice home." He said something entirely different. First, buy assets that will generate steady cash flow, and then use that income from assets to buy your nice home. That is the fundamental difference in the sequence of steps. 3 financial cash flow models. To lock this idea in once and for all, let's look at how money flows for 3 different categories of people. Model 1, the poor model. A person receives income in the form of a salary. All of this income is instantly directed to the expenses column: food, cheap rent, clothing, transportation, and utility bills. The person completely lacks asset and liability columns. Whatever they earn, they spend. Model 2, the middle class model. A person receives a good income from a high salary. However, they immediately acquire liabilities. Take a mortgage, buy a car on credit, use credit cards. These liabilities generate huge additional expenses: bank interest, maintenance, insurance, taxes. In the end, the middle class gives all their income to service their liabilities. They work to feed banks and the government system. Model 3, the rich model. Rich people build their lives differently. Upon receiving income, they first direct it into the assets column. The assets begin to generate their own income: dividends, interest, rental income, business profits. This income from assets covers all the daily expenses of the rich person, and the remaining portion is directed back into purchasing new assets. This creates the compound interest effect and a financial flywheel. The rich get richer not because they work to exhaustion, but because their assets grow and generate even more money. Part 4. 6 Lessons from Rich Dad. The entire book is structured around 6 fundamental lessons that Robert Kiyosaki learned from his mentor. Let's break down each of them in detail. Lesson 1. The rich don't work for money. Robert learned his first lesson at the age of 9. Rich Dad forced Robert and his friend Mike to work in his small grocery store for a measly 10 cents an hour. After a few weeks, the boys grew tired, protested, and came to demand a raise. They were ready to quit. Rich Dad listened to them and smiled. He said, "Now you feel the exact same way most of my hired workers feel. You want more money, thinking that will solve your problems." Rich Dad explained to them that a pay raise doesn't solve problems if a person doesn't know how to think. Most people work for money out of fear and greed. Then Rich Dad offered them to work for free and The boys were shocked, but they agreed. Forcing their brains to look for options without a salary, they noticed that the store owner threw away old comic books. They made a deal to take them, opened a comic book library in a basement for local kids, and charged 10 cents for entry. They hired Mike's sister for a fixed fee to keep things in order. As a result, the boys started making $9.50 a week without even being in that library. They created their very first asset. They learned how to make money and systems work for them instead of selling their time for a paycheck. Lesson 2. Why teach financial literacy? It's not about how much money you make. What matters is how much money you keep and make work for you. World history knows thousands of sad examples where famous athletes, musicians, actors, or lottery winners made tens of millions of dollars, but just a few years later found themselves completely bankrupt with gigantic debts. Why does this happen? Because they had zero financial literacy. If you give a person who doesn't know how to manage money $1 million, they will simply buy expensive liabilities faster, take on obligations, and crash even harder. Financial literacy, according to Kiyosaki, rests on 4 main disciplines. First, accounting, the ability to read financial statements, understand cash flow, balance sheets, and the difference between income and expenses. Second, investing, the science of making money, capital allocation strategy. Third, understanding markets, grasping supply and demand, economic cycles, micro and macroeconomic factors. Fourth, law and taxes, knowledge of tax rules and legal tools to legally protect and preserve your income. Lesson 3. Mind your own business. Kiyosaki urges you not to confuse your profession with your business. Your profession is what you do 40 hours a week to pay your current bills. For example, you might be a great accountant, programmer, doctor, or sales manager. Your business is working with your assets column. The book cites a famous example involving Ray Kroc, the man who turned McDonald's into a global empire. Ray Kroc was speaking to students and asked them, "Does anyone know what my business is?" The students laughed, thinking it was a joke, and replied, "Of course, your business is hamburgers." Ray Kroc smiled and said, "No, my business is real estate." The point was that selling hamburger franchises was merely the company's profession, but the key condition of the franchise was that Ray Kroc's company bought the land under every new restaurant. Today, McDonald's is one of the largest owners of the most valuable real estate in the world. The core message of this lesson: keep your day job if you need it to live, but starting today, begin building your business. Direct your savings toward creating and purchasing assets in your spare time. Lesson 4. The history of taxes and the power of corporations. The poor and the middle class often sincerely believe that if taxes are raised on the rich, life will get better for ordinary people. But Kiyosaki reveals the historical trap. Originally in England and America, taxes were introduced as a temporary measure strictly to fund wars and were collected only from very wealthy citizens. But the government system tends to expand constantly. It requires more and more resources. Eventually, the tax burden shifted to the middle class and the poor. Rich people don't just sit around doing nothing. They use a legal tool called a corporation or a legal entity. What is the fundamental difference between an employee and a corporation from a tax perspective? Let's look at an employee. They first earn money. Then the government automatically deducts taxes from them. And only then does the person try to live on what is left. Now, let's look at a corporation. It first earns money. Then it spends that money on all necessary expenses to grow the business: equipment, transport, training, business trips, office rent, advertising. And only after that does it pay tax on the remaining net profit. By understanding tax laws and using legal entities, wealthy people legally keep the vast majority of their income, while ordinary workers give 30 to 50% of their labor to the government. Lesson 5. The rich invent money. In the real world, very often, it is not the smartest or most educated people who get ahead, but the boldest and most decisive. Financial genius requires not only theoretical knowledge, but also courage. The main barrier holding millions of smart people in poverty is a paralyzing fear. Fear of making a mistake, fear of losing money, fear of judgment. Yet mistakes and failures are an integral part of any success. Those who avoid failure simultaneously avoid success. Look at how a toddler learns to walk. They fall and get bumps dozens and hundreds of times. If they were afraid of falling, they would stay crawling for the rest of their lives. Kiyosaki asserts, investment opportunities do not come on their own. You create them with your mind. There are two types of investors. The first type is passive investors. They buy off-the-shelf investment products, mutual fund shares, prepackaged stock bundles, or hire real estate agents. The second type is professional investors. They find undervalued properties themselves, find financing, bring in smart people, connect resources, and create high-yield deals out of thin air. Lesson 6. Work to learn, don't work for money. Rich Dad advises, choose a job not based on how much you will be paid right now, but based on what you can learn there. Many incredibly talented specialists, writers, artists, engineers, doctors, chefs, remain poor all their lives for one simple reason. They develop only one narrow professional skill. But to succeed in the real world, you need a comprehensive set of skills. And the single most important skill that separates a successful person from an unsuccessful one is the ability to sell, advertise, and market oneself, one's ideas, and one's product. Kiyosaki shares a real-life story about being interviewed by a young and very talented journalist. She complained to him, "I write wonderful articles and novels. Critics praise me, but nobody buys my books. I barely make ends meet. What should I do?" Kiyosaki looked at her and said, "Sign up for a course in sales and marketing." The woman was offended. "Me? Sell? I have a degree in English literature. I am a creator, not a common market vendor." To this, Kiyosaki calmly pointed to the cover of his book and said, "Look closely. It doesn't say author of the most artistic books. It says author of the #1 best-selling books. Learn sales, negotiation skills, public speaking, marketing, and people management. These skills will make you a financially independent person in any environment." Part 5. The Cash Flow Quadrant. Although the topic of the cash flow quadrant is detailed in Kiyosaki's second book, its foundation is laid right here. To understand where you are, you need to look at the 4 sectors of the financial world. Sector E, employee. This is where the vast majority of people are. Their primary values are security, stability, and benefits. They trade their time and life energy for a fixed paycheck. If they stop working, their income instantly drops to 0. Sector S, self-employed. These are people who decided to leave their boss and work for themselves. Private doctors, lawyers, tutors, craftsmen, small shop owners. Their core value is independence. But they fall into another trap. Now they become their own toughest boss. If a specialist in Sector S goes on vacation for a month, their income stops. They are still trading time for money. Sector B, business owner. These are people who create systems and attract smart specialists from sectors E and S. Other people work for them. A business owner can leave for 6 months, and their system will continue to operate and generate profits. Sector I, investor. In this sector, money works for money. Investors direct capital into assets, securities, real estate, and business, receiving passive income. Kiyosaki's goal is to show that true financial freedom and wealth exist exclusively on the right side of the quadrant in sectors B and I. Part 6. 5 obstacles on the path to wealth. Why do many people, after reading the book and understanding everything, still fail to achieve success? According to Kiyosaki, there are 5 internal psychological obstacles standing in the way of financial independence. Obstacle 1. Fear. Everyone experiences fear of losing money, both the poor and the rich. The only difference is how you respond to that fear. Out of fear, poor poor people hide money under a mattress or in banks where inflation slowly destroys it. Rich people use fear as an incentive, calculate risks wisely, and learn from losses. Obstacle 2. Cynicism and doubt. Doubts like, what if the market crashes? What if there's a crisis? I can't do this. Paralyze the will. Doubters listen to the advice of armchair critics who haven't achieved anything themselves. Rich people rely on cold analysis and facts, while cynics criticize. Obstacle 3. Laziness. And this isn't about lying on the couch. The most dangerous kind of laziness is busy laziness. This is a situation where a person works 12 hours a day at a job, cleans the house to a shine, or constantly watches TV just to avoid thinking about their financial future. They have no time to work on their assets because they are too busy keeping someone else's house in order. Obstacle 4. Bad habits. The main bad habit is paying everyone else first and yourself last. An ordinary person, upon receiving a paycheck, hands money out to stores, banks, utility companies, leaving themselves whatever is left, which is nothing. Rich people apply the rule, pay yourself first. They first set aside a fixed percentage into the assets column, and only then look for ways to cover remaining bills. Obstacle 5. Arrogance and pride. Arrogance is an attempt to cover up ignorance. When a person thinks they know everything, they lose money. Never stop learning or acknowledging gaps in your knowledge. Part 7. The dark side of Kiyosaki and criticism of the book. It would be completely unfair to present this review in a purely glowing tone. Over the past decades, Rich Dad Poor Dad has faced harsh criticism from independent experts, journalists, and real investors. Let's break down the main objections. First, did Rich Dad actually exist? Journalists from leading economic publications conducted investigations in Hawaii multiple times, trying to find traces of the figure described by Kiyosaki. They found zero proof of his existence. Later, Kiyosaki himself admitted in an interview that Rich Dad was more of a composite mythical figure compiled from different people. This means the autobiographical nature of the book is largely a marketing play. Second, the danger of financial advice. Kiyosaki is a staunch advocate of buying real estate using borrowed capital leverage. In a rising market, this yields huge profits. But when an economic crisis hits, falling real estate prices mean that investors who followed Kiyosaki without a financial cushion go bankrupt overnight. In fact, one of Kiyosaki's own companies went through bankruptcy proceedings in 2012 due to lawsuits. Third, lack of concrete instructions. The book provides a massive motivational boost, but it contains almost no concrete practical tools. It won't teach you how to analyze a company's financial statements, how to properly assess legal risks when buying real estate, or how to build a balanced portfolio. It is a book on psychology and philosophy, not a practical manual. Fourth, the marketing business model. For Kiyosaki himself, the book became the ultimate asset. Its success birthed a giant corporation selling expensive seminars, training courses, cash flow board games, and dozens of follow-up books, many of which simply rehash thoughts from the first volume. Treat Kiyosaki's book as your first alarm clock that wakes you up from financial slumber, but don't take every single idea as absolute, unquestionable truth. Part 8. Conclusion and key takeaways. Let's summarize. What is the book Rich Dad Poor Dad really about? This book is not about how to get rich quick or buy a luxury car in 3 months. It is a book about a profound transformation of mindset. It's about moving from the status of a helpless consumer and employee to the status of an investor and creator. It teaches us simple yet fundamental truths. Money is not the ultimate goal. Money is merely a tool that gives you the most valuable resource on earth, your personal freedom and time. The difference between a rich person and a poor person is determined not by today's salary, but by what they do with their money and time during their off-work hours. And the single greatest investment you can ever make in your life is an investment in your own mind and financial education. Change your attitude toward money. Stop working for a paycheck. Learn to build assets. Make capital work for you. And never stop learning. Thank you for listening. May your assets always grow and your liabilities trend to zero.